Let's go ahead and begin. I'd like to call to order the meeting, a regular meeting of the Monterey Bay Community Power Community Advisory Council for Thursday, November 15th, here at 6 p.m. And it's no longer on the agenda, but I'd like to, in honor of the 100th anniversary of the ending of World War I and Veterans Day, lead you all in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Lair, would you go ahead and take the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Community Advisory Council Member Dr. Bueno. Hartman.
Present.
Osmer is currently absent. Wolfram is absent. Amaskita. Stedman.
Here.
Groot.
Here.
Bezira Wist. Capron.
Here.
Vice Chair Levon.
Here.
And Chair Byron.
Present. So I'd like to welcome Ms. Wist back. We've missed you. So I'm glad you're back from your travels. And Mr. Habashi, I noticed there's someone new sitting at the table here. Would you like to introduce him so that we all know who he is?
Yes, of course. We got a new counsel, our general counsel. He's being loaned to us from the journalist Monterey County. He works right now as a deputy general counsel over in Monterey County. This is, by the way, Robert Shaw. And he's going to be our general counsel for the foreseeable future until such time when we decide to hire a permanent general counsel.
Wonderful. Mr. Shaw, you don't have a microphone, but I'm going to lend you mine anytime you want it. Please introduce yourself and tell us whatever you'd like.
Thank you, Tom, for that introduction. I think Tom covered it. I'm looking forward to being of service to you and to the policy board and to the operations board. But thank you very much.
Okay. Welcome.
By the way, just one more thing that Robert suggested, and I think it's a great idea that he would be sitting next to you this way. He wouldn't have to kick me under the table when I'm not able to do anything really. So.
Well, we're all very concerned about making sure we don't do anything wrong. So you grab the mic anytime from me it's necessary. I think I should open first for public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Item 2. Do we have any public comment? Please, go right ahead.
Michael Saint with Campaign for Sustainable Transportation. Good evening, Council, Mr. Habashi and staff. This evening in Watsonville is a very important transportation night. My county's Regional Transportation Commission is being presented the preferred scenario by its staff for the Unified Corridor Investment Study. So basically what this is going to do is set the transportation system in Santa Cruz County for the next 30, 40, 50 years and beyond. So it's quite important. They will vote on the preferred scenario on December 6th. I've reviewed it myself. Unfortunately, it is still highly based on favoring single car occupancy, and increased greenhouse gas emissions will increase substantially. I know I'm preaching to the choir when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions. Monterey Bay Community Power has done such a wonderful job in reducing those. But aren't we supposed to be reducing emissions through all our projects? And I'm not real happy with the RTC presently. There are some good programs they put out. They're big on biking and walking and safety, and I think that's all wonderful. Transportation, as you know, is now our number one gas house green emissions in the county here, in all 3 counties. Due basically to the formation of MBCP. They've done so well in decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. Transportation jumped up to number 1. What I'm suspecting is our transportation sector is not as concerned with greenhouse gas emissions because you guys have done such a good job here, they're resting on your laurels and you've done all the heavy lifting. They are still approving 20th century projects for the automobiles and widening highways. Thus, the handout that you see in front of you, the green one there, nice pretty cover on it. This article is basically 10 years old, but the content is relevant to today. In actuality, we are worse off today than 10 years ago. Our metro ridership in Santa Cruz is down to 3% of the population. In 2010 to 12, it was 4.4%. We are losing the congestion war. Supporting highway expansion and single occupancy vehicles reduces transit ridership by improving flow initially and then filling up again in a few years back to where we were. I will not be asking MBCP to fix our transportation problem. It is not your mission, but I will come along later in agenda item number 7 and propose a project and something that maybe we could fund to help our mass transit system here in the 3 counties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3. And let's see, Ms. Lair, is there any agenda corrections or proposed additions?
No, Chair, they're not.
Excellent, thank you. So the agenda's a little bit different because we're going to start with a presentation on item 4. Energy Solutions Senior Engineer Ed Pike on charging station new and retrofit building codes as an informational item. So Mr. Habashi, would you please explain this and introduce Mr. Pike?
Happy to. I'm going to ask Director Richard to, not Director, I'm sorry, Councilman Richard to introduce Ed. But just before he does, we've been talking now since we started working with you on focusing on electric vehicles and building codes and a lot more on trying to build local solar or local distributed generation. I think that's where the effort and the focus need to be. MBOD has been in that business for quite some time, and it seems quite suitable that we have one of their consultants that's been working with them on the building side of the business make a presentation to you tonight. So Richard, please.
Okay, I don't have a lot prepared, so sorry, Ed, but we've worked with Ed on numerous projects in our jurisdiction.
Richard, if you could please turn on your mic, please.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, we've worked with Ed on numerous projects with the Monterey Bay Air Resources District. We've been very much involved in infrastructure projects for electric vehicles, and we've received good counsel. And other than that, I'll let Ed introduce the topic and talk. He's presented to our board as well, and I think you'll find his information very valuable.
All right, thank you. Please go ahead.
Hey, great. Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation to come and speak with you today. So what I want to talk about, and just let me ask, I'm kind of tall, so is this microphone working? Can everyone hear okay? Okay, great. So I wanted to talk to you about opportunities for EV building codes to support electric vehicle infrastructure. And it's great to have leaders like the city of Santa Cruz and Monterey counties working on building codes. So, there's already leaders in the community. I think there's a lot more opportunity. So I want to talk about that, and then maybe talk about some ideas about what the CAC might want to consider doing to help move that forward.
CAC being us.
CAC being you, yes.
Okay.
Yes, the Community Advisory Council. Thank you. So first of all, let me just ask, how many people have heard of green building codes? Okay, so pretty much everyone's heard of that. We'll go real quick and talk about why should EV infrastructure codes go into the green building codes. I think we can, go over that kind of quick too. I think you're probably pretty familiar with that. And then talk about kind of the overview of who's already doing this, who's done it, who's working on it right now, who are we talking to within the community to, provide them with information and explain the opportunities that are available. Talk kind of briefly about what to include in EV infrastructure building codes. We do have more detailed slides, so I'd be happy to share those if folks are interested. I guess maybe talk to myself or talk to staff, and we'll be happy to give you like more of the nitty gritty nuts and bolts if you're interested. And then we'll talk about the recipe for building code adoption and things that the Community Advisory Council might want to consider doing. So as it sounds like all of you already know, oh yeah,
No, I'm sorry, I'm waving to another council member, a CAC member that's just showed up.
oh okay.
Glad to have you. Please, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. And speaking of interruptions, I'm really here to help you. And so if you have any questions along the way about, the content of the slides or ideas or other kinds of questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time. So just the green building codes is, I think you all, sounds like already know, are contain requirements such as water efficiency, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, air quality, things like that. One thing that confuses a lot of people is that there is a mandatory statewide CalGreen code that didn't used to be mandatory. It used to be just voluntary. And that even though there is a mandatory statewide, local jurisdictions you can adopt your own more stringent building codes if you choose to do so. And there are 28 California counties and cities that have already done that for EV infrastructure. Yeah.
So those mandatory codes, do they apply to only new buildings or also retrofits?
So that's a good question. And right now, CalGreen for EV infrastructure applies only to new buildings. And I think that's part of the opportunity that we'll talk about. Sure. So this will probably seem like common sense to everyone here, but just to run through some of the reasons for why a jurisdiction would want to adopt their own local codes, to support local climate action plans, to support local EV adoption, to support similar state goals. And, as you can see from the slide, California's goal is 100% EV adoption by 2050. And I was pleased to see that in the last quarter, California already has a 10% sales rate for plug-in electric vehicles. So I think that's really fantastic. But it's, of course, one important milestone along a long road ahead of us. And, buildings that are being built now or are undergoing like modification or renovation, most of those are still going to be around in 2050 when we need to have 100% zero emission vehicles on the road. Primarily, I would expect plug-in vehicles. And having infrastructure in new buildings or when a building's already being renovated, it just saves a huge amount of cost. We'll get into some more details briefly, but you avoid things like breaking open hardscape, having to rip out an electrical system, having to go through all kinds of soft costs, go through permitting and inspections and overhead. And it just really makes it a lot easier to get that infrastructure in the ground. And another factor is that it's just so much less hassle. And one of the interesting lessons that I've learned that I didn't recognize up front is even when there's grants or programs to get EV infrastructure in the ground, one of the hardest things is to find a site, even if they don't have to put in any significant amount of money, just because of the hassle factor. So if you can remove that hassle factor, it's going to be so much easier to find someone who's willing to accept a charger that may not cost them anything if they can plug it into the wall rather than having to build infrastructure, even if they don't have to pay for it. But I think that's another important factor. And EV infrastructure, as I'm sure this is probably not news to any of you, is really a critical factor limiting electric vehicle adoption today, especially in multifamily housing. Just an anecdote, basically, everyone I know who's in multifamily housing who wants to have an EV can't because they can't get a place to charge. And in the city of San Francisco, the chief proponent for their EV code amendment talked about how she, being a San Francisco supervisor, cannot get EV charging in her building because she lives in a multifamily building and it wasn't constructed with the infrastructure in place. So just to put some numbers out in terms of the cost effectiveness of having infrastructure in new construction or when buildings are being modified anyway, the bar on the bottom is how much it costs to put in an EV circuit in new construction. The bar on top of that in green is how much extra it costs, 2 to 8 times more under these scenarios that we looked at for the city of Oakland. And we looked at a lot of different scenarios, but the overall theme was pretty clear that it's just way more cost effective to do things when buildings are originally being built rather than having to go and retrofit them later.
Pretty significant.
And having EV infrastructure codes in place will also facilitate programs to get chargers in place. As I was mentioning, even if someone didn't have to pay for that infrastructure, it's just hard to get people to agree to have a construction project on their premises. And likewise, communities that adopt EV infrastructure codes have a real opportunity to kind of differentiate themselves as leaders in this space when applying for, grants from the Energy Commission, regional grants from, MBARD or, your local CCA, PG&E. It really shows that community is going to be a good receptive area to for folks who are operating grant programs, and then also for individual property owners. I think it definitely will help them show that they are ready and that they can successfully participate in a program because they're not going to run into most of the roadblocks that stop EV infrastructure projects, in my personal opinion. So I think the two are like highly complementary. So just to show building code adoption, we developed this map with ChargePoint, and I think the key takeaway here, there's a lot of dots, but when you look at the the orange dots for multifamily housing, for non-residential housing, basically all of these jurisdictions have covered at least those two building types. CalGreen and many jurisdictions also cover single family, dual family. And California is a real leader. We talked about 28 different communities in California. Most of those are, Bay Area, Monterey, or San Francisco Bay Area. So I think there's, obviously a lot of leadership here locally, which is fantastic. And there's a lot of opportunity to do more still.
May I interrupt for just a quick question?
Oh, please.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So like the previous slide on the residential requirement, is that just basically running two 220-volt circuits out to the garage? Is that basically what, it's kind of like, we build houses and we put a dryer circuit in. So is this basically just making sure you build a house and you add 2 more circuits in the garage for the EV charger?
Yeah, it's really simple for single family housing.
Of course, and of course it gets much more complicated for a multi-dwelling.
For multifamily, a lot of jurisdictions have kind of 2 levels where they'll have a certain number of complete circuits that are built out, so you can just plug in. I mean, not that you'd use these circuits exactly, but it would look like what you see here on the wall, or more appropriately, that dryer circuit. You just go and plug it in. And then they also will have infrastructure for expansion later. So like 10% of the parking spaces might have the plug ready to go today, and then there'll be electrical capacity, some conduit, other aspects that will just make it easier to build out the other 90% of up to 90% more spaces later, but not put all the cost of building 100% of spaces out today.
Thank you.
Is that single-family requirement already in place?
So CalGreen has a requirement to put in a panel capacity for that single-family home and to run empty conduit, but not actually to put in a full circuit. So, to me, it seems kind of common sense for single-family to just, when you're in there, put in that wire. And also, if you're building a new single-family home, instead of putting in a surface-mounted conduit, a lot of times you can just put that wire in behind the wall and you don't have to pay for conduit. So it seems like, to me, kind of a common sense thing to just build a circuit.
And what size are those circuits? Is it just a 30 amp charger, or is it a larger one?
Mm-hmm. No, it's a 30 amp charger for multifamily or non-residential. You can have some unallocated panel space that you haven't built out those circuits yet, but you have the panel there or part of a panel for capacity later, and then you could potentially share that between multiple circuits using load management. You could potentially up the amperage to individual circuits if you feel like in the future people are getting bigger batteries and 30 amps isn't enough. You could take that panel capacity and upsize the level of EV charger you could put in, or you could do a mix of load sharing and upsizing capacity. And some jurisdictions have gone to 40 amp circuits that can support a 40 amp charger. So there are some examples, but in general it's 30 amp. And so that's basically just charging my Nissan Leaf in my garage at 6.6 kilowatts. So then to kind of zoom in on the local community here, we have this map, and I hope the icons aren't confusing, but basically we're trying to differentiate the agencies that have already adopted code or are in the process of, in Monterey County, developing a recommendation to take back to the Alternate Energy and Environment Committee. And then just to kind of show also that we've had a lot of outreach, where we've had a lot of meetings, phone calls, emails. You'll see there are a few areas where actually we haven't found the right person yet. So if you know who that person is, please do let me know. I'd love to talk with them. And also just to, this is kind of a takeaway you can take back if you're operating within your local community, so you kind of know where we've already gone out and met with staff for the local agency. Or again, if we haven't, let us know who we're missing that we should be reaching out to. Yeah, please.
So interpreting this map, it looks like 2 out of the 3 counties have adopted ordinances for this already?
So the city of Santa Cruz has already adopted their local ordinance, and Monterey County is currently considering adopting an ordinance.
But the county of Santa Cruz has not gotten there yet.
They have not got there yet.
Okay.
No. So we've been talking with them and encouraging them, and we're happy to support them moving forward if that's something they choose to do. Okay, so now let's talk about how we can support local agencies that want to move forward with code adoption. So the first thing that we've found and we've heard pretty clearly is having the elected local official to champion building code adoption is really the key driver. And that's something that, your committee might want to consider in terms of your, own personal local elected officials. It's something that, you might want to consider making a recommendation to your policy boards in support of local EV code adoption, since that ties into obviously a lot of important local elected officials, and they might want to take that back to their staff individually, and in addition, if they were to choose to make some kind of recommendation, I think that would be super helpful in raising the profile of this opportunity throughout the entire 3-county area. And in addition, having engaged staff has always been super helpful. The other things that local agencies could potentially need are, example codes or model codes, effective outreach, both, internally to make sure that staff are all up to speed and aware of what's happening between different parts of an individual government, as well as engaging with stakeholders and making sure that they're informed and engaged. And then just all the details of the actual adoption package. So you're maybe wondering, how's that all going to happen? So for the first bullet, I've kind of mentioned some ideas about what, this council might do to engage elected officials. And then Energy Solutions is funded by the Monterey Bay Air Resources District to provide basically everything else that's on that list. To help staff get engaged, to do outreach presentations to whoever needs it, to draft the building codes, provide an example model building code, to revise them to meet any specific local needs or priorities, to provide cost effectiveness data where it's needed, and then provide a draft staff report, information to file with the Building Standards Commission. Really, whatever it is that the local agency might need, our job is to be a resource for that agency to make it as easy as possible for them to go through code adoption. And, we've gone through this process a number of times with a number of different cities. So, we have all these resources available. So we can both pull them off the shelf, but we also can tailor them for local jurisdictions that want to do something a little bit different. And we do have a time limit on that. And so we're available through basically the middle of next year, or whenever the funding runs out, whenever the resources are expended under that contract. We're available to do whatever will help local jurisdictions, and Monterey Bay Air Resources District has been very clear that they want us to help, your communities with whatever kind of resources and support are needed to move forward on this opportunity. So we're happy to help in whatever way we can. So thanks very much for your time. I'll leave you with that's my contact information, and my colleague who also has been doing a lot of outreach, and folks in your community may have interacted with both of us. But that's the brief presentation I wanted to give you. Again, I'm happy to provide more details on what's in the building codes and examples of like what Santa Cruz has adopted and things like that. But for now, I'll just stop, and happy to answer any other questions that you have. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pike. Please stay there because I'm sure there are questions. Mr.
Great.
Stedman.
Yeah, Ed, could you talk a little bit about the current thinking of ADA access and what that entails and what you've seen across the state at least?
Yeah, that is a huge issue, as I'm sure you already know. And there is an opportunity for the building codes to help fix that issue for new construction, because right now the CalGreen codes, even for the amount of infrastructure that they do provide, it doesn't have to be built in a way that could be turned into a charging space later. So someone could build, as many parking spaces as are required by CalGreen, and none of them they might be constructed in a way that none of them could meet accessibility requirements, and thus none of them could actually be turned into EV charging stations. The good news is there's a pretty simple fix. And so we worked with Fremont and Oakland and San Francisco to just have language that kind of syncs up their codes with the ADA requirements, so that they're not setting the bar any higher or lower, but they're basically saying, when you're developing all these wonderful, EV charging spaces, make sure that the required number can meet things like, accessible slope. You can get a path of travel into the building. You don't have strange, unusual obstructions that people can't get around. And it seems to me to be like a very simple fix for new construction, also modified buildings that are subject to building codes. So it won't solve this important issue for every installation, but at least we can fix it going forward. That's a great question.
So I have a more fundamental question that I hope you can answer, and it might show some ignorance on my part, but why do we have to do this on a city-by-city or county-by-county basis? I mean, the Energy Commission has authority under, I think it's Title 24, to do efficiency standards. I believe they've added a requirement on new construction to have a solar capability, a PV requirement. Why can't there just be a requirement statewide that says you have to put in EV charging, period?
So that is a great question, and I know it can be a little confusing. So the EV codes actually are spread among a number of different agencies under the umbrella of the Building Standards Commission. So unlike the energy requirements that are owned, I think pretty much entirely by the Energy Commission, or you can tell me if that's not accurate. The CalGreen codes are kind of split out amongst a bunch of agencies, and the target is kind of set a minimum level statewide, not to go up to the level that we actually need to get to support EV adoption goals. So all the local codes that we've seen in the 28 different jurisdictions have been far more progressive than CalGreen, which for multifamily right now sits at about, ARB is estimated with various exceptions and so on, is right now about 1% to 2% of parking spaces at new multifamily. And the Air Resources Board has been doing a lot to move that up. So we are expecting that to go up. but not nearly as fast as local jurisdictions are moving, and not nearly as fast as we're going to need to get to meet these aggressive goals. They don't address this lack of harmonization with accessibility. They don't existing buildings at all. So it's important. It's good that we have the state codes, but they're not nearly covering all the things that need to be covered.
Okay, so this, in my mind, this seems like a pretty simple, no-brainer kind of thing that we should be recommending and endorsing, but I'd like to hear from other members of the council. But maybe I'll stop there before I add any more comments. Mr. Groot?
Well, I was going to ask the same question, and it seems to me that that's kind of an incongruency on the part of our legislature to have a EV mandate that we all have to meet and then not provide the tools to do so. So I worry that we develop a patchwork of different ordinances that makes it very difficult for the construction industry to manage too, and how they're going to manage different projects in different counties or even municipalities. So it makes perfect sense that I think this should be a statewide solution rather than hopscotch through various different entities.
So I don't know if you want to take comments here or if you want me to add something.
I would love to
first.
hear from you on that.
Okay,
Sure.
great. Yeah, I think that is a great point. And so like we worked with Fremont, Oakland, San Francisco, and we developed a model code that they all adopted. In some cases they fiddled with it a little bit. Marin County adopted, Monterey County might adopt that same building code. So I think what we're seeing is not that the local codes that are being adopted are like fundamentally different. It's just that some jurisdictions are moving forward, others aren't. And there may be some differences between the local codes, but so far they seem to be following that common model that's been established by a number of agencies in the Bay Area. If you go to Palo Alto, they're probably going to do it different because everyone there's driving a Tesla. But outside of a couple of those hotspots, they're pretty much following that same basic model. It's a great point.
So where does the resistance come from? Is it from the building developers and owners that don't want the additional cost of putting in the EV infrastructure at the time of construction? Who's against this?
No one's really come out in opposition. We've never really had formal opposition to either at the state level or at the local level. The California Building Industry Association has been very involved in the state codes, and they have never opposed adopting the state code or the more improved local state codes, which, obviously are not as progressive as many local agencies. So we have met with builders, and they've had concerns about, do we have to put in an EV charger in every single parking space in our building? And so definitely there's been like a lot of education and outreach, like for Oakland and San Francisco. But I think they realize that this is something that's an amenity for their tenants. There's a lot of policy support. It makes good sense. And the cost is fairly minimal. Maybe they'd rather not pay that extra little cost, but I think they can kind of see the good sense in it. And so we haven't had formal opposition.
Please.
Are the codes more related to energy efficiency in the buildings and energy?
CalGreen is less focused on energy efficiency. That's more the California Energy Commission, and I'll defer to others with more expertise if we need more detail on that. But CalGreen is in Part 11 versus Part 6 for the Energy Code of Title 24. I know this gets very confusing. CalGreen is one of the more confusing building codes, to be honest. But it doesn't address energy efficient light bulbs or walls or things like that. It covers kind of a miscellaneous assortment of water efficiency and indoor air quality, like low chemical, like rugs and wall materials, and EV charging, having bicycle charging, encouraging carpool parking spaces, things like that.
So they have no requirements related to energy efficiency?
So I think CalGreen may have some things that kind of spill over into efficiency, but everything that's related to energy efficiency is primarily the jurisdiction of the California Energy Commission. And some of these things like clean transportation, they have an energy relationship, but they're not primarily energy efficiency.
I'm asking because in Europe, in Germany, they have a very strict code regarding building, new building, and also, excuse me, refurbishing, and all related to energy. This is why.
So, Mr. Stebbin, we are going to come back to you because I'm going to ask you to sort this all out for us and explain how this all is going to work. But I think there's a few more questions.
I was just trying to
Ron?
clarify answering your question. California has very high building standards, but they're just separate from CalGreen.
What he said.
So, Mr. Stedman, you've put Mr. Pike up to this to present to us this morning and this evening, and I understand MBARB is funding this. So, can you give us the bottom line or put this in context?
Well, the bottom line is we have a resource to use here, which is going to take off at the local level, and we think we can get more done than trying to wade through at the state or even the national level, which would be nice if we had a more top-down approach. But I think this is more efficient. I just wanted to add that when the Air District reviews environmental documents for project developments, frequently our comments are, especially if they're trying to meet CEQA standards for NOx emissions and for greenhouse gases, we recommend that they install charging stations in new developments to buy down, as it were, those emissions. So we hoped in the near future to have a couple of $1 million for a very prominent development to offset and mitigate NOx emissions. And with that money, we hope to build a localized charging station for a multifamily development. So there are things in the works that are happening. It is just sort of like the Wild West, though, because there aren't really good standards to frame all these new laws and ordinances. So it helps if the counties and cities adopt their own standards so that at least the developer has some assurances on what they're doing is going to meet expectations down the line. But there is a natural pressure right now to force folks into providing chargers and to reduce greenhouse gases as well as other pollutants with new developments.
So, I would have one last question, and then I'd entertain discussion if the council member is interested in what you think about the recommendation about us moving this forward to policy board, and that is, how would we go about doing this? In other words, how would the city or the counties that are in this jurisdiction go about doing this? We'd make this recommendation for all 3 counties?
Yeah, and the short answer is they can, contact us and we can help them develop all the materials and information they need. And then at the local level, just mechanically, and maybe your attorney might want to, I don't know if this is in your arena or not, but we've worked with local agencies to develop an ordinance that then goes to their governing, whether it's a board of supervisors or council members that then approve the ordinance through their local adoption process, along with the actual text of the requirement, typically in building code, but some agencies find it works more conveniently to put into a planning or a zoning code, so it doesn't necessarily have to go in your building code. And then, we help them prepare the staff report and all the supporting materials, and then that ordinance gets adopted, and then the regulation becomes effective in that jurisdiction.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I guess what I'd like to do then, just so you get the benefit of public comment, let's open it up to public comment and see if any other members of the public would like to add to this.
I'm not as tall as Ed. Christy Markey, I work with Supervisor Jane Parker, and I just wanted to emphasize something in Ed's presentation. Our office brings a lot of great ideas to staff, and they say, that's a great idea, but I have a workload this long, and I don't know when we can get to it. Ed comes in and says, I'll write your staff report. Here's the ordinance. I'll rewrite it the way your agency wants it rewritten. Basically, it's free staff. And that's made it move much more quickly at Monterey County because the staff just had to give him some direction. He did the work. So if you can find an elected official or a high-ranking staff person in your local jurisdictions, your cities, your county, that you can say, hey, look, this is a great resource. It's not going to be here forever. I think it's June 2019 that it ends. Yeah, so 6 months basically. So try to get somebody in the agency to see the value of it and to move it through. Thank you.
Excellent. Hang on 1 second. Any other public comment? Let's do this. Ms. Lamont, do you have Ms. Lamont, you want something to say?
Yeah, I just had a quick question for you. So you mentioned that City of Monterey County or City of Monterey has already moved forward this. Same with City of Santa Cruz.
Mhm.
Who has and hasn't done this in our counties? Who are the people we need to knock on?
Great question. So I don't know if you all have access to this presentation, but feel free to contact
Be
me,
great
or
to
I don't know
have
if it's
it,
better
yeah.
to go through staff here. But this map basically shows who we've talked with, or who we reached out to, and maybe we didn't reach out to the right person and didn't hear back. If you see some of those agencies where it's just a dot and there's no indication that they're working on an actual building code or that we've emailed them or had a conversation with them, those are the folks where we haven't figured out who to reach out to, and we'd love to hear from you, like who else should we be talking with. And even if we've done outreach in one of these agencies, we might have contacted the sustainability staff person, or maybe the building official, or maybe a elected official. But we know that even if we talk with one person, that's not necessarily informing everyone who needs to know about this idea. And so for other cities, we've actually done briefings where we'll bring in, okay, here all the permit staff, the inspectors come in there, and the planning staff. I'll get in the room, and then we'll do a presentation, and we'll talk about this idea and make sure that all their questions are answered, that we get their feedback from all around the room in terms of how we can make this work best for them. So we're happy to do briefings for an agency and all of their interested staff. And we're also, happy to continue meeting individually or, with specific individuals for any of these jurisdictions that have an interest. So please do let us know of who you would recommend us reaching out to, and feel free to also contact folks and just see, are we being helpful to them? Are we being effective in communicating and getting to the right people? And then if not, then let us know who we're not effective at reaching, or what are we not providing that they might need from us.
Okay. Any other questions? I thank you very much for this presentation. Mr. Stedman, thank you for arranging it and for putting it on our agenda as an informational item. I think there's definitely something here that we need to explore further. I'm going to be talking with Mr. Habashi, and I can see this one coming back as an agenda item in the not too distant future, hopefully as early as next month, so we can take advantage of the resources if indeed that's what this council recommends. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, moving on to, yes, sir.
I would just ask if we could get a copy of the presentation sent to us electronically so we can review it again. Thank you.
Item 5, consent agenda. The only item there is the approval of the minutes of the October 18th, 2018 meeting of the Community Advisory Council. Any changes or corrections? Good. I hear a motion. Oh, do we public comment on meeting minutes?
Because it's a consent item.
Excuse me. If there's no changes or corrections on the council, open it up to public comment. Okay, seeing none. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
One abstention. I was not present.
Mr. Groot, thank you. Okay, motion passes. We're on to regular agenda, item 6, the CEO's report. I turn to Mr. Habashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start with the introduction of our new business development manager, Matt Willis. Is he back here somewhere? Matt got quite a few years of experience in the business, and he hits the ground running for two reasons. One, because the man who hired him, JR, went off on maternity leave 2 days after he joined in, and second reason is we have a business opportunity that we're going to be speaking about later, and he is pretty much taking the lead on that one. So I'll let him introduce himself. Matt.
Mr. Willis, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. As Tom mentioned, I've been in the space for quite a while now. And I like to say before an inconvenient truth even happened, I was in the energy space, so I've had a vested interest in it. But yeah, I'm really appreciative to be here, and look forward to working with everyone and meeting the mission and making it a strong entity in the neighborhood. So thank you guys for having me. Reach out anytime you need to.
Thank you.
Next, I want to update on your PCIA decision, which I really don't have much of an update. We've been seeing lots of numbers coming from Pacific Gas and Electric. Some of them as late as 2 days ago, and they have some serious flaws, don't reflect either the proposed decision or the alternate proposed decision. They are back working on it and trying to fix it. They also, as you probably know, are very busy nowadays with trying to figure out how they're going to get out of this new problem that just started a few days ago with the fire up in Northern California. That seems to be even more destructive and is going to be considerably costly, more so than the one that they already been trying to deal with that happened 18 months ago, in Sonoma. So we're still waiting on them to give us some new numbers so we can update our budget and find out what our financial performance is going to look like. And as soon as the numbers come out and as soon as we have some certainty of what those numbers are, I will for sure make sure that you get to know all about it. Yesterday, as some of you already learned, both the city, actually the day before yesterday, the city of San Luis Obispo and the city of Morro Bay decided that they want to join us. I've apologized that you didn't get to know about it ahead of time because I didn't get to know about it until 2 weeks ago when I received a phone call from their consultant saying they have given up on the process of trying to do it themselves after the decision on the PCIA came about. Because they saw the net margin really dwindle. They thought it's going to be a decent one. Then after the decision came out, that number went down considerably, and they decided there is a huge gap between the principle of local control and wanting to do their own thing and the practice of maybe joining with us, having proved ourselves to be doing well in that space. So they both the councils passed resolutions. Both were 5-0, requesting to join us. Yesterday we had a joint session with the operations board as well as the policy board, and they were very receptive to the idea. We couldn't actually have him join yesterday because we needed a period of time between the time we notify all the cities, all of our members, and the time we actually approve a resolution to have him join. So we're going to get to do that on December 5th. And also on December 5th, we will be updating the JPA. We will be updating the implementation plan and asking for the policy board to sign off on all that because we have to submit it to the PUC prior to the end of the month. Otherwise, we won't be able to bring in San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay until 2021. As it is, if we get the implementation plan to the CPUC before December 31st, we'll be able to bring in both cities, launch the program over there in 2020 as early as January. So that is the plan. So January of 2020, we got these two cities coming in, and we will be probably on a tour in January and February to the rest of the cities over in San Luis Obispo County, as well as the county itself, to see if we can bring the entire county to come along, and then we'll have the entire coast going all the way from Santa Cruz down to San Luis Obispo, and then maybe we'll talk to Santa Barbara next.
So all of a sudden, we're 30% bigger come next year.
No, I wouldn't say that. The two cities are about an increase of 8%, 8 to 9%. If the entire county comes in along with the other incorporated cities, then we are up to 30%.
I see.
Can I ask a question? Tom,
Please.
I don't understand why is there a deadline for the two cities to come in, but then there isn't for the rest of the county or the cities to join later? I don't
Well, because the others have the way the CPUC resolution works is if you want to enroll a town or a county in 2020, you need to submit the implementation plan prior to the conclusion of 2018, and you have a year to do what you need to do to prep up to bring those new customers in. Now, the County of San Luis Obispo and the other incorporated cities, they have not started the process, and they have not figured out whether they want to do it. They didn't do a feasibility study. They didn't do a technical study. They didn't do anything to prepare to have them join. And obviously, they have to go through that work in order to get there. They're going to have the entire year of 2019 to do so, if they so choose. And if we can bring them in prior to the end of 2019, then we can start enrolling their customers in 2021.
Stedman.
Tom, have you figured out a governance structure with representation on the board? And
Yes, they agreed that the two cities will have one representative on each one of our boards. So I would say next month when you meet, there will be a new member added to the commission. Same thing is going to happen at the policy board as well as the operations board. Each will have an additional one member, and it works really well because they are 8%. 8% is about 1/12 of the total, and so one member out of 12 is just about right.
Mr. Stedman, yesterday's joint board meeting, there was a lot of discussion by those two boards around governance.
Are there any issues with having a 12-member board? Am I still on? Yeah.
Not that I can tell. It's
Meaning we don't have an
incredibly-
odd number, so we.
Typically, you have an odd number.
Yeah, it's typical, and I agree with you, but generally what I've sensed from our type of organization, the Joint Action Agency, it's incredibly unlikely that I will ever bring an item to you when I'm sensing there's a 6-6 split. It's just not likely. And if I ever do that, then you really should tell me to go home and not come back. Any other questions? Okay,
Quick question. What
yes.
about this council? So are
I'm sorry?
This council, are we taking more people onto this one then too? We get one from each city? Just one for both
No, just one.
cities?
Yeah,
Okay,
they will have one
thanks.
representative, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I want to report on something that we've been working on probably for quite a few months. The City of Gonzales, as you may know, have been trying to build a business park or industrial park. And when they talked to PG&E, they, in order to get power to that business park, PG&E gave them one, you need to wait a long time before we can update our grid to be able to withstand the kind of load that you guys need. And two, you're going to pay us upfront a lot of money so we can build that, do all those upgrades. Then when we connect to you, and if you actually begin to generate money, then we'll give you some of that money that you gave us back. That's pretty standard routine for Pacific Gas and Electric when an entity requires a connection. The City of Gonzales they did not like to wait as long as PG&E wanted to wait, and they also think that the amount of money that PG&E is asking for is considerable. PG&E got their own issues nowadays, and I'm pretty sure that whether the money or the time, it's going to get even, the number is going to go higher. They have been asking, and they've tried to do it on their own, but they've been asking us, can you work something out? I think this is a good opportunity for business, a good business opportunity for us in order to enhance the local economy with one of our members. So we are talking to them now about how can we step in as the wholesaler, find a way to get generation to happen locally around that business park, buy that, sell it to the customers in that business park on the retail side, stay pretty much off the grid for a few years until such time when we can work things out with Pacific Gas and Electric, then get the connection that we need eventually to hook that business park into the grid. If there is one way to improve and help the local economy, I think this is definitely one of them. And we are seeing that and hearing that resonating now throughout our local area, especially in South Monterey County, where there are a lot of appetite to start businesses and not a whole lot of electric connections or electric wires or capacity to serve that area. So we will be talking to them about how to start this business venture together. And Matt is going to be very busy over the next couple of months. And certainly, as we move forward, we'll be coming back and talking to you about it further.
So this has been an ongoing issue within the agricultural sector also, that we cannot get connections, sometimes 18 months to 24 months in length. And so I would fully support that we move forward with this and show PG&E that we're willing to put an alternative source of energy in, and show them that we can do it a whole lot faster and a whole lot better than what they can offer us at this point. This has been a sore point in my office for a long time, and I would really appreciate it if we could do this. Is this the site that Mann Packing is also building their facility on?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, good. Yes, move forward.
Interesting that you say that, Mr. Groot. I remember years ago, maybe 15, I used to chair the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, a committee on distributed energy resources and building these microgrids, and the pushback we would get. Of course, IOUs are not interested in helping this sort of thing, but this is a wonderful thing that can be added to the list of benefits of community choice aggregation.
Well, frankly, I would envision that this is how all the municipal utilities at one point or another started. It's just a couple of folks coming from a local city saying we need power, and a large conglomerate saying I don't have the time or the energy to tap into your neighborhood, and so they went out, put a generator in, built some lines, and the next thing you know, they got a municipal utility. And I think if there's time to do it, this is the time, especially given the trouble that PG&E seems to be getting into lately.
But now we're not putting generators in, right? We're putting in renewables and energy storage.
Well, I hope that it would be only that, but we more likely would have to put some smaller combustion turbines that will help keep the load going 24 hours a day. If it's just solar and storage, it would be very expensive, and we probably don't have the kind of land that we need in order to do that. There will have to be a transition, basically.
Tom, I wonder if at a future meeting, it's a really creative, cool project to move forward. It seems like the costs will be significant, and I wonder if you will be bringing to us and to the other boards a breakdown of the financial just budgets to show us how it all works.
Absolutely. This is not the kind of thing that I'm not going to just go from concept to construction without having to go through a lot of discussion with this as well as the operations board.
So, Mr. Habashi, going back a little bit further, I've got a question that relates to the PCIA. In just recent days, the fire that's raging up in Northern California and the effect it's having on PG&E, potential liability stock price, does this add uncertainty to the whole PCIA calculation or not? I mean, do you know?
Yeah, not to the PCIA calculations, but it could indirectly impact the PCIA.
Because of their potential insolvency is what I'm asking.
So my thinking is, for example, if PG&E were to declare bankruptcy, which they have threatened to do about, I don't know how many times in the last year, and I think given where their stock price is and some of the actions that they've done in the financial market, I think they're getting a lot closer to making that decision. And if they do, it's quite possible that they will turn to some of their suppliers from whom they buy very expensive power, because they do have contracts that is probably about 20 cents a kilowatt hour coming from some of the solar contracts that they've signed into. It's quite possible that they're going to go back to some of these contractors and say, we can no longer pay you that kind of money, given that we are bankrupt, and they would probably renegotiate these contracts or just flat out bail out of them. If that were to happen, then these contracts, with all their extra costs, all the excess payments that they make, will be taken out of the equation and the calculations of the PCIA, so the PCIA will be reduced. So as much as I hate to say it, and as much as I hate to see this company going bankrupt again, there may be something that will be positive for us. But the uncertainty itself is definitely a negative thing.
And you've answered my question, because indirectly you may not get resolution on PCIA costs for a lot longer. I think you're anticipating it next month, but if something were to happen, it could be delayed for a much longer time till you get some resolution on the exact numbers.
The more delays, the better, because I'm not seeing the numbers. They're definitely not going to be any better. Yeah, so it's going to get worse. I know that. So the more delay, the more we stay where we are, the better we are.
Well, a lot of good news in your report and some bad news. Any other questions before I open it to public comment? Let's do that then. Any public comment on the CEO's report?
Michael Saint, Campaign for Sustainable. I just had one question for Tom here. On these car fires and all the other fires that went on the last year or two, what is the California state as well as federal's role in that for funding? They've claimed disaster areas. Does that help PG&E at all?
I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I know that the federal government have to step in to help, but they usually step in with loans and to kind of shore up what the insurance companies, or to reduce what the insurance company will have to put out. But eventually, the insurance companies will go after PG&E if the fire was caused by something. If PG&E's lines or issues sparked the fire, which it sounds so far from everything I've heard in the news that was the case in this last fire. It was, again, sparks from defective equipment that sparked something in that area, and 5 minutes later, the whole thing was up in flames. So my guess is, no matter who pays, and no matter how much help the state or the federal government puts out, sooner or later, somebody's going to come back after PG&E for those costs.
Yeah, we can speculate a lot on these kinds of things at this point. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none. It just dawned on me, you didn't mention anything about the new artwork that's all around this room. I noticed it right away when I came in. Would you like to say anything about that?
We just needed to cover the walls, and I do.
Well, they're beautiful, beautiful old photographs. I'm
Yes.
sure they didn't cost very much at all, but it adds a lot, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we, let's see, item number 7 is a discussion item, update on the MBCP programs. Mr.
This is our
Habashi.
monthly update, and Beth is going to step up and tell us what's going on.
Ms. Trenchard, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening.
If you
That's
want.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, you're going to stand, okay.
I like fidgeting. That's a hard act to follow. New cities and Gonzales. I'll do my best to keep you interested. I'm going to start off with the EV incentive program. I just want to make sure you all know that we did post our RFP for our program administrator for our EV incentive program. We posted it in October. We've gotten quite a few questions, lots of interest. I'm hopeful that we'll get multiple proposals. We'll then have several weeks to evaluate, ask questions, with the goal of naming our program administrator December 4th. So that everybody understands the role of the program administrator, it's pretty broad. It would include all procedures, processes, and controls around the entire program. It would include all customer contact. It's the dealer training as well as all of the material. It's the internal reporting to staff so that if there are any issues, we can quickly revise the program, make those changes. And it's also external reporting so our community is kept in the know on all of the program success. So it's a pretty extensive program administrator role. Also related to the EV incentive program, we have a really incredible group of community members, all with deep roots in the community and very good relationships with our local dealers. We have Sharon, who was the founder of Monterey Bay EV Association. We have the president of the Electric Auto Association. We have Emily from Ecology Action, and we have Carrie at the Bay Federal Credit Union. Thank you. We're all working together. I think we have our last strategy meeting next week. Then we'll all be doing outreach with our local dealers with the objective of first making sure they know who Monterey Bay Community Power is, then educating them around the EV incentive program, and most importantly, making sure they understand how valuable that program can be for them, all with the objective of building interest as we get ready to launch that program. For the Cal EVIP charging station program, we have been waiting for what we've been referring to as a co-funding agreement from CSE. That's the program administrator for Cal EVIP. We received it. We've gone through multiple iterations. We should get our next and hopefully final iteration from CSE right after Thanksgiving. So we're getting close. We're getting very close. That's kind of the first step that we need to complete before we actually start defining some of the program elements within Cal EVIP. To get ready for that process, we're speaking with a lot of our community members who have experience doing charging station installations. The point here is we need to make sure that all of the resources and tools are available for our community in preparation for Cal EVIP. So once it launches, it's a solid program. And my last bullet there was really just a shout out to MBARD as well as Ed, doing tremendous work. If we could get those building codes, those charging station building codes in place, we will have more charging stations in the Tri-County. It's critical. This is a program that I wasn't planning on really putting a lot of energy into until after the Cal EVIP program had launched, but we just got new information, so I just wanted to share some background information with you now. First, a quick refresher. If you'll recall, one of our programs is to leverage state funding that's called SASH and SOMA funding. One funds single-family affordable homes. SOMA partially funds solar installations on multi-unit dwellings. What we wanted to do was leverage that state funding and whatever wasn't covered through those solar installations, use our MB Green Plus funding and program dollars if necessary. We are working closely with Grid Alternatives. Grid Alternatives is not only the SASH program administrator, they're also the program manager, which means you have to go through Grid Alternatives to get access to the SASH funding. Grid has shared with us that the current bucket of funding in SASH is quickly diminishing. which isn't a problem because there's full expectation that it'll get replenished. However, when they replenish the funding, they're going to be changing the customer eligibility requirements. For us, that's very painful. It means fewer customers, fewer Monterey Bay Community Power Tri-County customers will be eligible for that SASH funding. So all of a sudden, there's a sense of urgency to look at this program sooner rather than later.
So you know how they're changing the eligibility requirements?
Yes.
They're making it more difficult for who?
They're moving it to Cal EnviroScreen 3.0, which is what CEC and CPUC use for most of their programs. Cal EVIP also could potentially use that, but they're being very flexible with how they define it. In this case, it's possible we could negotiate changes, but we don't know that. Grid Alternatives isn't sure. So this is just the information we've got right now. To give an example, nobody in San Benito County would qualify for SASH funding once the eligibility requirements change.
Wow.
So my commitment is I'm going to do a lot more research, do a lot of review, and come back with some suggestions for next month so that we can really look at this specific program.
So you're going to be on the agenda every month. Is that what I got earlier?
Lucky you.
I think we made that point very clear since the beginning.
All right. No, we're very pleased with that, Ms. Fenchert. Go ahead.
And this is my last slide. Again, if you'll recall, the idea was to get solar installed on not just single-family homes, but multi-unit dwellings. The multi-unit dwellings can leverage the state funding called SOMA. We were really excited about this because it's also an opportunity to install charging stations and storage. And it's very hard to get charging stations installed at multi-unit dwellings. MVARD has had some success, but it's hard. This program, the SOMA funding, isn't available until 2019. It's also a much more complicated program. So at this point, this piece of the program is going to wait until after Cal EVIP. So the focus initially right now is just on that SASH funding that could potentially impact our customers. That's all I've got. Any questions?
Council? Must have been a hard day for a lot of folks here today. We're all very quiet. Mr. Mosqueda.
Okay.
We got a question.
So this program is just for the affordable housing?
Pardon me?
This program is just for the affordable housing?
Yes, it's the SASH and SOMA funding is for just affordable housing, either single-family units or multiple unit dwellings.
So what is the limit of the affordable housing? Is it 80% of the state income, or how do they figure out that?
There's a whole list of eligibility requirements. It's pretty extensive. Would you like me to kind of review it?
No, that's fine. Maybe I can get some information from you because we have 64 units where I work, and some of the people are very low income, and some of the other people they're not. So it's very difficult for us to qualify under the affordable housing.
Yeah, I know that for single family, the household income has to be 80% or below the area median income.
That's about 48,000.
I think it's actually lower than that.
Lower.
What I can do too is next month I'll have a summary of the average household income that would be impacted by the program, the amount of dollars saved, so you can have a real sense of what the program would do.
Thank you.
Mr. Caprone.
Beth, where is the decision being made about changing the eligibility criteria from just a straight income criteria to a Cal EnviroScreen? Because I've run into that before, and it really seems irrational that it's, like you said, wiping out whole areas, even though there's significant numbers of low-income families in those areas.
Yeah, and it seems arbitrary. I don't know, and I'll find out for you for next month. I do know that there is a lot of flexibility all of a sudden around that metric. So for instance, the CEC is willing to negotiate for our Cal EVIP because we'll have the same issue there. We just learned that another agency has been able to negotiate some changes off of Cal EnviroScreen 3.0. So I think people recognize that the tool is terrific for heavily populated, dense areas. It works. But when you come to more rural areas or more suburban areas, it just doesn't capture where the need is.
You may not like the answer that you're going to get on how that's determined.
Yeah, I won't, I'm sure.
Any other questions, council members? If not, we'll open it to public comment. So this is the update, item 7, update MBCP programs. Any public comment?
Thank you. Christy Markey with Supervisor Jane Parker's office, and I'm also the co-chair of the Monterey Bay Electric Vehicles Alliance. As Jane's staff person, she's very supportive of EVs, and the alliance started 9 years ago, and there were just some RAV4s still on the road and a few cars that people had built themselves, and it was really hard to get people to pay attention. They said, oh, EVs aren't going to take off, and it's come a long way. And I just want to say that Beth has jumped right in with a lot of enthusiasm. She's gotten to know a lot of the key people in the EV community and is really tapping in, like she said, to those people with deep roots who have longstanding relationships with dealers and different people who can help move the programs along. And just really want to thank this organization for helping with the electric vehicle transition. We really do need to reach that goal that Ed had put up on the screen by 2050, and that's going to take an aggressive effort on all our parts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Michael Saint, Campaign for Sustainable Transportation. I hope this is the right agenda item. I totally support all the EV things going on in infrastructure. It's all amazing stuff. I hate to feel like a broken book here or a broken record, but I've always been a kind of a believer that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I think EVs are wonderful. I have 2 of them myself, but they don't solve the congestion problem. And so that being said, what can we do today to help advance the use of mass transit? And I'm here to recommend a program that has already been offered by the Santa Cruz Mass Transit Company to Santa Cruz City. And basically what that is free bus passes for 4,000 employees. That is presently in the state of being looked at in advance. So what I recommend is that I'd like to, on behalf of Campaign for Sustainable Transportation, propose that the CAC put on their list of future programs for the community funding of free bus passes. And to get down to specifics, my co-chair, Rick Longinati, and I are going to meet with Beryl Emerson, Manager of Planning and Development at Santa Cruz Metro, probably in the next week or so, not only to get their input and blessing on this, but to see where they are on that resolution presently. If that resolution is approved in Santa Cruz, then they will have funding through the parking structure fees. If this is not passed at the city level, I think this would be an excellent opportunity for Monterey Bay Community Power, the CAC, to fund free bus passes for those employees. All the benefits are there in the handout you got in front of you. Program cost at that time was approximately $311,000 for 4,000 free bus passes. And what that included was bus passes for everywhere in the Metro District in Santa Cruz County, with the exception of the Express over to San Jose. So it covers quite a few people. And even if you just got 1/8 of the people who use these free bus passes, you're taking a lot of cars off the highways. This meets the goal 1 of Monterey Bay Community Power, which is reduce greenhouse gases emissions. It also improves family income by them not using maybe another car and going to work on a bus. And it's very beneficial for social justice. If we can offer people in low-income areas free bus passes, it would help them immensely. And it addresses our biggest problem. That's congestion and single car occupancy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, no additional public comments. Moving to item 8, update on the MBCP Outreach Communications Program. Mr. Habashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I promise Peter is not going to be here every month like Beth. At least once a quarter, he'll.
I hope you don't misunderstand. We like having Beth here every month, okay?
I didn't take it that way. Thank you.
Peter, please.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. Excited to share some updates on outreach and communications with you guys. We are amidst planning for the 2019 calendar year right now, so I thought I would kick things off by sharing some of our key initiatives for the next year. We've broken them down into 4 areas: community engagement, sponsorship and advertising, online community, and the MBCP brand house. Community engagement will continue to be at the top of our list, if not forever. Events will still be a key part of that equation, but we're definitely going to be scaling down. We went to, as you'll see at one of the later slides, an incredible amount of events this year, so we're going to choose quality over quantity next year. We're also looking forward to leveraging a lot of the relationships we've forged with chambers and non-governmental organizations and community groups. We've joined a ton just in the past 3 to 6 months, so they're going to be a great extension of our outreach efforts. Also identifying strategic partners in the non-residential community as we go to help us get the word out. We've done a great job making inroads to the underserved communities, identifying some great organizations. California Energy Services, Central Coast Energy Services is just one of them. Also doing a good job making inroads with the low income and ag working communities, and continuing to identify opportunities for us to become part of education, for instance, STEM education and bringing renewable energy into the classroom. We're still in the information gathering phase, but that's something we're going to be leaning into a little bit more in the next calendar year. Sponsorship and advertising, as I said, we're recalibrating our scope. One of the big changes is just differentiating the type of advertising we're doing. We've done a lot of print advertising this year, a little bit of broadcast, and next year we'll be doing more broadcast and considerably more digital advertising, in hopes that that will help us connect with more people in a more efficient way and certainly in a more cost-effective way. So continued event sponsorships and paid advertising, but as I said, kind of recalibrating how we're going about things. Our message can really be broken down into 4 focus points. We're always going to be, on some level, talking about the MBCP value proposition, in essence, cleaner energy at a lower cost and local reinvestment. But we're looking forward to talking more about service offerings, namely MB Prime. We're actually starting an ad campaign that begins running next week in some of the local newspapers, and we'll build out from there online and social. We're very much looking forward to talking about our programs, and just being number 3 on that list doesn't mean that they're low on the list by any stretch. I think when you add up everything that we're going to be talking about next year, the majority is going to be about programs. But we're also excited to dial messaging up around rebate options, probably mid and latter part of the year, when we can accurately look back and share out information as far as hard metrics around what sort of funds were returned to the community through rebates this year. In the online community, we're looking forward, after residential enrollment, very much looking forward to getting back on offense. We've been in the defense mode a little bit on the social media realm. There's been a lot of chatter out there in the residential community, and we've been doing our part to try and correct some of the misinformation and provide accessible tools for people to help share the right information with their communities. We're acquiring some tools to help us do that. We just signed on for a year-long contract with a media tracking agency that's going to help the efficiency of getting the word out and also measuring how our message is being received. We're going to continue growing our social network and online community. We're in the process of working on a video project right now that is devoted to people better understanding their bill. We're hoping that will be done early December so we can share that out before people get caught up in the holidays. Big news for next year and the online community, and really for our team as a whole, is we're going to do a full website rebuild, probably February, March-ish. We put out an RFP probably 3 weeks ago. We've been getting a pretty good amount of interest. And so that's going to just be a huge forum for programs and for all the other messaging we're doing. And as part of that, we're really wanting to address the Spanish-speaking website alternative. Currently, we're using Google Translate. We know it's imperfect, but equally imperfect is having two different websites to manage. So one of the big asks of our web developers that we can kind of find a middle ground in between having two totally separate websites and twice the work to manage, and something much better than currently Google Translate. Last but not least, we're definitely going to be starting to look at our service offerings and rebate options as individual brands in and of themselves. They're part of our greater MBCP brand house, but we're going to be looking to elevate them and help them each kind of stand on their own two legs, so to speak. Last time I spoke with you guys was, I think, when we were getting ready to go full tilt on residential enrollment. So we'll do a little look back here. These were our priorities going into residential enrollment. Really the same goals, maximizing the best enrollment possible, but dealing with a very different customer. And as we were doing that, we didn't want to lose touch with our commercial customers. They're, as we all know, the better part of our load. So we did a great job, JR especially, and even Matt, since she's come on board, have done a great job keeping us in touch with our key customers, continuing to learn from them, and working more closely with some of our trade organizations and identifying some of those success stories that are out there, who the advocates are in that community and who the influencers really are. But as we geared up for the residential enrollment, we really did have to retool our tactics, and that's one of the reasons why we relied on a lot of print advertising this year, and advertising spending in general, is we just had to, in the latter half of the year, deal with a much bigger, broader audience than we did at the beginning of the year. Beginning of the year, we had the luxury of direct contact to the top 1,000 customers on the commercial side, and just can't do that with such a large number on the residential side. We also leaned on our founding agencies more so than trade groups. We leveraged our strategic partners, and as I said, we did a lot more paid advertising. We did a lot to dial up MBCP brand in the community. Important to note that all of our staff, especially our outreach staff, is really committed to just fostering goodwill wherever we go, whether it's someone else's event, our own event, a presentation, for us to really become the trusted community resource that we want to be and to become a beloved brand for our community. We just always have the mantra of fostering goodwill. It sounds simple, but it really does carry through in all the things we do, and I think it's an important foundation for the outreach team. And we'll continue to do more to position MBCP as a valuable resource. One of the great things about the timing of residential enrollment was it hit during peak event season, so we were able to make the most of community events out there right at a time when it meant the most to be connecting with residential customers. And we even came up with a couple of our own signature events. I think the verdict is not out yet, but we'll be redoing at least one of those, the Community Power Festival or the Clean Air Fair. And all the while, in the background, continuing, as any good communications team does, continuing to support our own internal staff and giving them what they need to do their jobs. So some highlights from residential enrollment. This is year to date. We've been to, and when I say we, I mean really the outreach team, Mark Adotto, who I believe is here in the room, community outreach coordinator, and our team of interns. They really did the lion's share of the work out there, doing over 49 presentations, went to over 63 community events, connecting with more than 250,000 event attendees, more than 8 public forums. We sent over 1 million enrollment notification mailers. In addition to that, we've sent over 30,000 mailers to NEM, Solar Choice Care, and FARA customers. So we're doing a lot to get the word out. You can see the breakdown of events by county. Not a huge surprise there. Opportunity alone is partly what dictates the unequal slices of the pie there, but that's also good motivation for us to do more in San Benito and Santa Cruz counties in coming years. Some highlights from the enrollment numbers. We're still hovering right around 98% of our eligible load, about 97.5% of our total customers. I did want to note that we did have, and now a little bit over 6,600 residential opt-outs. When you look at just that number, it sounds like a lot. And we're going to take that to heart. I look at that as an opportunity next year for hopefully getting some residents more engaged, more in support of what we're doing for the community, whether they decide to opt back in or not. Again, though, importantly for us, and the bottom line, when you look at it from a load standpoint or from a total number of customer standpoint, enrollment has gone fantastically. With regard to service offerings, We are to date 170 MB Prime opt-ups, combined around 50 MB Green and MB Share opt-overs. But I think, as I said at the last meeting when I presented as well, we haven't actually dialed up campaigns around any of those yet. MB Prime starts with print ads next week, so we hope to see those numbers go up. And then later next year, a concerted effort around the rebate options.
Mr. Berridge, can I ask you to
Please.
go back to that last slide?
Yeah.
I think we all know what opt-outs are, and opt-ups are the 100%. What are opt-overs?
Opt-overs are the rebate option, essentially, and a little bit of it is, I guess, nomenclature that we're using. So opt-up is self-explanatory in that it's up to a premium, right? People do MB Prime for an added cost of 1 cent per kilowatt hour, so that is a premium service offering. When we say opt-over, it's mostly referring to the rebate options where people redirect their rebate. So the way both MB Green Plus and MB Share work is, instead of keeping your rebate as a cost savings on your bill, you can redirect your rebate or opt it over to MB Green Plus or MB Share.
Thank
And
you.
so that's an opportunity for an individual customer to kind of do their own give back to the community.
Excuse me, I had a question also. On the total opt-out that is predominantly Monterey County, could you put that in context for us?
What type of context?
Well,
Percentage?
Why is it so much higher in Monterey County? I mean, they're about half the load, aren't they, or are they more?
Oh, I see what you're saying. That is, I believe that is by customer. That is by account number. So that's
And-
why it's different than by load.
And that isn't proportionate to the number of customers, is it? That percentage?
That percentage is of all the opt-outs that have happened. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. 89% is from Monterey County. So of all the opt-outs, 87% from Monterey County.
Do you have
By
any
account.
sense as to why it's so much higher in Monterey County?
I have a little bit of that, a little bit of personal observation. I think, a little bit of it is maybe political climate. I think this project started in Santa Cruz County. There's maybe more progressive mindset, more embracing of renewable energy up in that neck of the woods in general. Interesting, I don't know if it's reflected on this, but the highest number of, is it by county? No, the highest number of MB Prime opt-ups are in Monterey County too. So it's a unique in that we have the highest percentage of opt-outs, but also the highest percentage of opt-ups. So I think both of those just point to Monterey County being a pretty diverse community.
Thank you.
I suspect, Mr. Caprone, they'll have to understand it better if they're going to go after those as an opportunity. Dr. Bueno de Bos, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had a question. Have you reached out to the leadership of the many unions in our area?
No, not directly. We have not.
Is
But
there
I
a
know we have
reason?
a representative here. So
Yeah, I mean, is there a reason why?
there's not, to be honest with you.
Do you think that it would be beneficial to use their leadership's kind of trust from their workers and their huge email listservs to be able to, leverage that to all the peoples who are the end users?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, thank you for suggesting that.
Very good.
Any more questions?
Mr. Osmer?
Yeah, is there any idea why? What's the predominant reason, or any analysis of what the opt-out reasons are?
Well, the most common when people opt out online, there's a few buttons they can click for the reason, and the number one reason is they don't like the automatic enrollment. That's the number one reason. Based on the conversations I've had with people, that can also be kind of construed as just not fully understanding the CCA model and the fact that it's the state and the CPUC that have mandated the automatic enrollment, right? That's part of the CCA model. But that is the number one reason, the most common reason. Yeah.
Another question. So I think the number one end user of energy in the county is Natividad Hospital. And I'm just, again, have you guys been able to contact many of the hospitals within the Tri-County area as leadership to help facilitate the leverage that they carry with all of the workers and end users?
Not on the outreach side, but I know that we did have some working groups, and that Mark Bachman, while he was working here, had a healthcare community working group. So that was at least a conduit into hearing from them some of their needs and helping to educate them about our model. But I think union and healthcare industry, I mean, those are both huge, labor union and healthcare industry. So those are great suggestions from you guys. Appreciate it. Exactly why we like connecting with our community members.
I'd add the universities to that list too.
Yeah.
I just think that we would be able to, I mean, you guys are doing a great job, and I think leveraging their internal email listservs and getting another voice from a trusted source would also just kind of continue to kind of meet the consciousness of the end users here.
Absolutely. Agreed. Yeah, I think, you know, even if they've heard the message from us, right, you hear the same message from us so many times, but when they hear it from a trusted source, it goes a long way.
Speaking of trusted sources, I mean, this is a community outreach presentation, and this council is pretty much a community in-reach, if you will, to coin a word. But there may be members of this council that might be willing to assist or provide some assistance in your outreach efforts. I don't mean to speak for council members, but this is a pretty involved group of folks. Of course, they're also, as I'm getting to know them, pretty busy already. But please consider that in the future too, that there may be some resources here of individuals that would be more than willing to help.
Great, appreciate the offer.
And they're trusted sources.
And I want to add that this is really, when this group was put together, one of the fundamental jobs that we hope that you folks will do is to be our ambassadors to the community. It's there actually in the rules for this council. So certainly we welcome the support that we can get from each and every one of you.
With that said, I think our plan, JR's plan, he'll be back in December, is to share our outreach plan with you guys then, so that these ideas are a little more fleshed out. By then I could certainly have added some of your feedback too, and that would be another chance for you guys to weigh in with what our plan is for next year.
Mr. Osmer.
Yeah, I'm curious, is there, in terms of other startups of CCAs, is there a drop-off in the opt-outs after a period of time?
It depends, and usually the major driver would be if the rates move to a point where it notches above PG&E, even though a lot of people would say, well, if it's small increase, that's okay, but that does impact the decision on a part of many people out there.
Thank you.
They have slowed down dramatically. I think they peaked end of September, early October, and have consistently slowed since then. Okay, moving on. Just a quick snapshot of our website and traffic. The key numbers to point out here, I guess. One is session duration. People are on our website for an average of 3 minutes. We translate that as people are getting informed, they're getting educated, and the bounce rate is still relatively low. You can see, I don't know if you guys can see the months there, but after September and after that residential enrollment period began closing, interest in the website drops pretty dramatically. But up top, some key numbers to note. And these are pretty on par with the percentage growth rates that I shared the last time I presented, between 30 and 44% growth from newsletter to Facebook to Twitter. So we are growing our online community, but we still have a long ways to go. As we always are, we learned a lot from phase 2, from residential enrollment, and we typically break our key learnings down into 3 areas: our message, our community, otherwise known as our customers, and the tactics that we've used. We're learning that our message is definitely a balancing act. It's always going to be one part our bedrock message, kind of our values proposition, cleaner energy at a lower cost and local investment, but there's always going to be an element of our message that is evolving, and the timeline that the evolution that we've been able to trace from We saw the same thing with non-residential as we did with residential, and we probably will see sort of a similar evolution when we're presenting new service offerings or new rebate options or programs. And the beginning is always very education focused, and there's an element of reassurance that comes into our message. And then we switch gears to more of a collaborative conversation, and ultimately the focus being on doing what we can to just continue building trust in our community. This year, even our bedrock message, we changed up a bit. At the beginning, it was always in terms of local choice, clean energy, and economic vitality. But for the non-residential business and commercial customers, it was really just about bottom line for them. So the message really got stripped down to just clean energy at a lower cost, and that seemed to really resonate with that crowd. But then when we switched gears back to the residential community, we really had to put it back into terms that were more relatable to your average residential customer. We spoke about stability, savings, local accountability, and local investment. And we're realizing now, too, that we really need to have a message all the time that is focused on just helping people better understand their bill. I mentioned the video that we're working on right now. And no matter where we are in our timeline, there's always going to be new customers. People move across town, across county. They start a new electricity account. That means they're a new customer with MBCP, and they go through that whole evolution again. So part of our messaging always needs to stay in the foundational bedrock message and helping people understand the basics about us and about their bill. As far as our community and our customers, we are starting to use more data to help better understand our customers. We've done some pretty cool breakdowns by city and county and demographics, care and FARA customers and income levels, and things that are helping us better kind of understand how and why some of these pockets of opt-outs have occurred. We know pretty well who our detractors are. We also know who our advocates and influencers are. And we're always asking ourselves what's missing with the plan that we're doing and what's missing from our equation. As far as our tactics, I do think we missed an opportunity around that first residential billing cycle. That's really where kind of the nexus of the confusion began. Just the nature of the bill design and Monterey Bay Community Power charges being on a new page and on their own when electric generation charges used to be part of a bundled service charge. It very much looks like a new charge. So it is really confusing to people. And I think had we anticipated the level of confusion there and maybe done a better job putting ourselves in customers' shoes, we could have mitigated some of the opt-outs around just people having a knee-jerk reaction in a negative way to that first bill they received. We need to continue fortifying what I say are the boundaries of our own messaging. And this really gets to what we were talking about earlier about having ambassadors and more spokes in the wheel, people out there in the community who, if they see our message kind of getting misconstrued or misunderstood, can let us know, or better yet, help get the message right back on track and help people be informed with the right information. Between now and the end of the year, really and beyond, we're transitioning from that new public agency mode, that startup mode of all hands on deck, and really going to be starting to look at ourselves more as a trusted resource for the community. But there's a few important parts of that equation. One of them is being patient, but the other is being humble. You know, one of the things that we and our team talk about a lot is being careful not to toot our own horn so much and trying to really celebrate our customers as the true heroes. I mean, everyone who's enrolled with us as a customer, maybe not everyone, but most made a conscious decision not to opt out. And in so many ways, they deserve some praise and some appreciation for doing the right thing. And so that's just from a branding and kind of messaging standpoint. When I say being humble, that's really what that's speaking to, is to always look at our customers as the hero and not get too caught up in shouting out all of our wins and successes as an agency. We need to continue anticipating and positioning to have the best successes. And one of the other big transitions is going to be focusing less on intangibles, carbon-free electricity, how does the grid work, how does billing work, and focusing more on tangibles. Metric tons of carbon emissions spared in our first year of operation, millions of dollars returned in the form of rebates, programs that people can tap into, tangible things that we're really looking forward to messaging about, and I think that will really help people better understand who we are and really what we have to offer to the community. We're definitely looking forward to developing a plan that we can execute towards. In addition to being kind of in an all-hands-on-deck mentality, we've really just had kind of a steady mantra of enrollment on our team for the better part of this year. So we're looking forward to a 2019 plan and team goals that really have actionable strategies that ladder right back up to the MBCP mission and our strategic plan. As part of that, moving away from all hands on deck, JR, our director, has made a concerted effort to kind of refine our roles and responsibilities and narrow our focus so that we're all cranking out the best possible work that we can be. We're going to be focusing on building customer confidence and brand trust. We've already gotten some testimonials from some commercial customers, and we're looking forward to putting those into action as part of our campaigns. We also have snapshots of what our emissions and cost savings metrics are going to be. They're pretty significant numbers. I hope that helps to build our brand trust and confidence. We're also going to be setting the stage for program opportunities and touting the benefits at the end of this year through our existing website, what I'll call kind of our program's preamble. And then the real whiz-bang launch of programs will be coinciding with our rebuilt website in February and March. As I mentioned earlier, putting more energy into supporting our sub-brands and our programs. Advertising for MB Prime kicks off next week, working with our strategic partners. And as I said, programs preamble towards the end of this year on our current website. And we'll continue doing what we need to support MBCP staff, our departmental goals, and working on the outreach plan for next year. Earned media has been a big part of our outreach this year. It's really an extension of our outreach efforts. And the best part is it comes only at an expenditure of energy and not money. That's the beauty of earned media. And many times people are hearing that stuff from a trusted media source. So the same way you were talking earlier about messaging through an organization that people are already connected with and how it's a more trusted source. We look at news the same way. I talked earlier about how different residential enrollment was from non-residential. These numbers just give a little glimpse of that. We're talking about 37,000 accounts versus 235,000 accounts. Ironically, a much smaller load, but many, many more voices, questions, and comments. And we did have a few things that came our way that did complicate our message to residential customers. One of those was July residential enrollment coincided with PG&E raising their rates. So a lot of people identified the first bill that had MBCP on it with a rise in rates. So that was something we had to work through, and a lot of, again, correcting, helping people understand their bills and correcting some of the misinformation that's out there. And again, as I said, really does look like an extra charge on the bill. And all that misunderstanding, calls, emails, and online discussions led us to launch a Setting the Record Straight campaign. We created a couple of new pieces of collateral dedicated to understanding your bill and knowing your costs. They proved really valuable to some of our partner agencies, cities, and counties. They use these to help their constituents better inform themselves and understand changes on their bill. And we also use these to respond to some of the social media discussions that are happening out there to help get the facts straight. I won't bother reviewing each of the press releases, but all told, we had eight major press releases go out this year that resulted in a total of 33 local earned media spots in broadcast and print. We're continuing to build credibility as a local energy leader. We sometimes have media reach out to us, not about stories having to do with MBCP directly, but about energy, and they want to just bounce some ideas or hear some opinions. So that's just a good indicator that we're being looked at as a local energy leader. We also got quite a bit of national media coverage from the last press release about our Solar Plus Storage project. Bloomberg, PV Magazine, quite a few others. So great to be making some headway with local media, but never hurts to be getting a little bit of national media recognition as well. With that, we are very excited to get into 2019 and happy
Excellent.
to answer any questions you guys have.
Thank you, Mr. Burridge. Excellent presentation, a lot of material in there. Council members, Mr. Groot.
I don't want this to sound like a criticism, but you mentioned being humble, and my constituents are very humble, and as a result tell a very terrible story. I would like to see us use some of our successes to tell a good story. I think we have a great opportunity to push some of the good stories out while we're still essentially new, so to speak. And so I understand being humble, but I think we also need to toot our own horn sometimes.
I think you're right. And one of the things we're going to do there is a recap of 2018 that we're going to put out early next year, and that will definitely be an opportunity for us to do just that. I think it's one of those things you hold one up against the other to kind of check yourself from time to time. But you're right, we do have a lot of wins, and that's one of the ways that we're going to get people back in our favor, especially some of those key commercial accounts who decided to opt out. So thanks for that, Norm. I appreciate it.
It's hard to be humble when you're great. Mr. Caprone?
So I've been involved in some of the response to social media, and the understanding your bill literature you put out was helpful. But for me, at the end of the day, to try to get someone to look at their bill and understand it was kind of a losing proposition because the bill is so confusing. I mean, there's a few things you can point out that maybe, but people who are skeptical, you can't logically walk them through it. And it just occurred to me, one tool that might be interesting would be to take the sample bill that you've created and get a sample bill. I don't know, PG&E probably wouldn't help you out with this, but if you were a PG&E customer, what would your bill look like? Same usage, same bottom line. And all they'd have to look at is the bottom line, and then all the ununderstandable, convoluted stuff wouldn't matter to them.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take that to heart. Thank you.
I was just wondering if there was any sort of talking points that you could share with the council for common misconceptions that may come up with our constituents that we could share with them.
Absolutely. I'll work with Brian and Tom to get those out to you guys.
Were you looking for those right now?
We have them ready. I don't have them printed, but we can certainly email them to you tomorrow.
Yeah, I guess I just got a comment, and I really got to say, there's a lot of advantage that we had in having everybody automatically signed up. And in that case, and I think that's the reaction from Monterey County, is nobody had a choice. I mean, they had to choose to opt out. And it's a little bit like, what I used to call the stealth votes on utility increases, is you put it on your bill and say, okay, if you're against this, you got to put in a protest. So it requires some action. So, I mean, I think there's a balance where you might not want so many people actually understanding their bill. And I think that's that is the balance, because there are a lot of people that just can't, because it is so confusing, is if it's got fairly level and no big changes, is just pay it and go on. We got too many things going on in our lives to be monkeying with that stuff sometimes, and I think that's a big part of the success so far. But I think that's exactly the way it's worked, and I think that if it tapers off, that's going to support that idea very much. So it makes it a very tough situation, I think. But I think the important part was that the effort was made to get the information out, even though it was kind of a stealth vote.
I think there's a really good argument when people talk about opting out. When we signed up for a PG&E account, we didn't opt in or opt out. Essentially, our government chose to make them a public utility, and our government has chosen to change that in terms of primary choice. So, they didn't opt in originally, so we didn't change something they did in the past.
Yeah, I think the argument is it's probably for the first time they actually do have a choice.
Yeah.
They can opt out,
Yeah.
and they can choose between either PG&E and us. But going in, they really never had a choice.
Right.
You talked about opportunity. Are you going after the individuals that have opted out? I mean, is there any sort of campaign towards them,
There will be, but
or
that will start on the commercial side.
Incentivizing them in some way?
Yeah. And that's when JR returns. I know that's high on the list for he and Matt to start working on, but they'll start with some of those big non-residential customers who opted out, and eventually we'll get around to the residential customers. But load-wise, and with all the other things we have to focus on, I think that re-enrollment effort is definitely going to be the bulk of it around non-residential. And we'll see maybe in the second half of next year, we can, as part of our messaging around programs, potentially extend that to get people to consider coming back in.
No other questions? I'll open it to public comment. We're on regular agenda item number 8 on outreach and communications. Okay, seeing none. Thank you. I take it, didn't I see JR here yesterday? So didn't his wife, she must have given birth
Yes,
recently.
I believe it was November 2nd or 3rd, and he's on paternity
Okay.
leave, but yeah, sometimes
comes
he
in. I see.
uses work as an excuse. But he just comes in for like an hour or
Yeah.
two.
Okay, I think we all understand that. I've been reluctant to bring this up, but I'm going to do it anyhow. Is it possible to get these presentations ahead of time? If there's any interest on the part of the council, I'd appreciate. Yeah, because it would help us to, I think, help formulate better questions and be better prepared for the meeting. You've got an eager group of folks here that would like to digest information before the meeting. Is this possible?
Yeah, we're happy to. We'll usually lately it's been trying to get those presentations done last minute, but we'll try to get them to you at least a few hours before the meeting.
I think that would be helpful, preferably more like a day ahead, but I understand. And you're giving us information sometimes that's in real time, and we appreciate that, and we don't want to reduce that, but I'm getting a sense from other council members that they would digest this material. You can't ask them to do it while they're in the car driving here.
We'll do our best.
So that's why I'm suggesting if it could be at least a day or so ahead of time. Okay, thank you. To the extent you're able to do that, it's appreciated.
Sure.
So I think we're done with item 8. Moving on to item 9, informational items. This is the item we always put on the agenda. Ask if there's any member reports or comments that you'd like to make at this time, council members. Mr. Groot.
So we've heard a number of times tonight about the need or the nexus concerning mass transit, and I know I've mentioned this before, but I'd like to have the transportation agencies of the 3 different counties come in and explain to us what they're doing to promote mass transit at this point. And I know MST has a program where they were giving out free bus passes for a while. I don't know if that's still in effect, but I think it'd be important for us as a council to understand what our transportation agencies are doing to promote mass transit and reduce congestion.
Well, that fits right into the topic I'd like to bring up in my comments, and that is we've had a number of meetings now. I think you're all getting the sense of the way that this system works. Just so you all know, Ms. Lamont and I have a monthly call with Mr. Hibashi. We set the agenda, and we've pretty much been taking staff recommendations on agenda items. But this is your council, and if there are topics that you want on there, please submit them to us well ahead of time. In other words, 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time would give staff opportunity to respond and prepare if there are topics that you wish to be added. Okay, so.
Mention when our meeting is. I think it's the 2nd.
Yes, so.
Tuesday of every month.
Yes, but that's probably not enough time to bring it up. We really need to, if we're going to bring a topic up, we need to give staff enough time to prepare. So really, come to a meeting thinking about what you want on the agenda, for what you might want to see on the agenda. Now, we're not looking to load up an agenda so that we stay here all night long, but I know there are important topics, as I've gotten to know some of you better, to each of you that you will want to bring up, and I hope you'll understand that's how we're going to do this. Correct? Correct. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to report or comment? Please.
You know, we have very little time on this meeting, maybe 2 hours, and we talk.
We can stay later.
No. I would suggest that if there's some time in the future that that the council can get together for 1 or 2 days, and maybe some staff and public members to figure out ways of how can we help this agency to be more effective, more have better way of funding programs, also to help more the residents of the 3 counties, and also help the environment. So maybe if we can find a day that we can spend and give ideas of what can we do to mitigate all these fumes that we thrown into the air. How can we lower the rates? A lot of ideas that can come out.
Looks like Mr. Shaw has an answer he'd like to provide.
Well, I don't know that it's an answer, but I think an important comment, and it ties into the previous comments as well. One, as a Brown Act body, if there's an opportunity to do that, it would have to be as an agendized meeting. And I think both with respect to presenting ideas that you might want to see on a future agenda, which is really what you're proposing. There are ideas that you might have that you'd like to have a discussion in a public open setting with public input. I think the best way to submit those would be through the clerk. Bren will happily take those emails and present them, and Tom can talk with the chair and the vice chair in terms of setting the agenda. But I think what you're proposing is exactly what the committee is intended to do, which is to consider these things in trying to further the mission of the authority, but it has to be in an open agendized meeting.
Well, I was not thinking about just us. I was thinking about including the public.
Yeah, and I would hope that the public feels included. They're here. They can comment on any of our items that are open for discussion that are on the agenda. So for the public to be here, there's ways of doing that. I think for staff, there may be public outreach things that the staff can do. But in terms of generating ideas through the council, they'll have to be on a public agendized meeting that the public can participate in. And there may be ideas that you have for staff to take that out to the public as part of some of the outreach that Mark and Peter were presenting on just a moment ago.
So, Mr. Amosquita, I think it's a very good idea. I'm interested in the same sort of thing. I'd like to discuss this further with you, perhaps a study session, perhaps something, a public agendized meeting could take place on a weekend. In a sense, what we do for the most part are study sessions here. It's all mostly informational items, and I sense what you're saying is that you'd like to see a longer period of time so that we could have more discussion. Maybe not at the end of the day when everybody's exhausted,
Right.
but when we're fresher.
Right.
So I'd like to discuss that more with you, and I'll work with my vice chair and Mr. Hibashi on seeing what we can do in the future to address that.
I have a question, Brown Act-wise, on that. Say perhaps we wanted to join the Clean Air Fair or something like that and have a booth at the Clean Air Fair. Come ask your council member questions or something like that. How would all of us would have to be there, right? Or
No, I would participating a number below the quorum wouldn't need to be required for a Brown Act. You wouldn't be able to take any action on any items, but certainly doing that in a way that doesn't hit the threshold of a quorum of your body. That's why it's not a Brown Act meeting for the chair to offer to talk or to meet with the chair, but it's at that threshold of a quorum.
You could man a booth, woman a booth anytime.
woman a booth, it would have to be less than, like, we could have like 4 people sitting at that booth to answer questions, and that would be okay. Sorry. I got you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And may I? So I have a Brown Act and staff question. Considering it's the holidays and a lot of us, this is a very passionate subject for us, and some of us are learning very quickly about the depths of it. Is there a way to have like a social event with the other policy boards and the staff and make it public so it, because I feel like it'd be nice to know everybody. Now we're increasing with Morro Bay and San Luis Obispo. The Cal CCA annual event was really nice. I just think, you know, we're starting to develop our own little family here, and if there's a way to kind of celebrate that with adhering to
There,
legal standards.
It's probably a more involved answer than just a response from the dais. And I'm happy to get back to you as to what that would be. And if there are other questions, it might be appropriate that we'll do just a full training, a Brown Act training that walks through some of these questions that are more centered around less of how to run the meeting, but interactions outside of the meeting.
So, to put a finer point on it, Dr. Bueno de Bosque, are you suggesting perhaps we could have a little wine and cheese after our December meeting?
I mean, that's what I'm asking is, can we have a social event with the other boards, the other, like the policy and the operations, you know? Oh, yeah, but you know, I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, on a social venue and a topic we all care about while adhering to legal standards on an annual or biannual event.
You want to say anything more?
Happy to get back to you.
Mr. Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few quick announcements. First of all, I'd like everybody to know we just finished up our EV incentive program. We spent $400,000 in a little over 5 months. We've funded the purchase or leasing of about 230 vehicles. As we do each year, we have the program. We go back to the drawing board. This year, we were trying to get more at low-income residents. We weren't really that successful. We got a few, but not as many as we would have liked. We're going to go back to the drawing board again, and we're very blessed and excited to have Monterey Bay Community Power here, because we're going to see what we can do to add value to their incentive program and perhaps dovetail in such a way that doesn't add confusion to the public. So we look forward to working with Monterey Bay Community Power in the future. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that Steve McShane, who's also on the Policy and Operations Board, I believe, he's heading up a sustainability fair January 19th at City of Salinas. And we're helping to sponsor through the Air District. We're going to have a ride and drive event for electric vehicles. So I'm inviting everybody to participate and come by. If you want to find out more, or if you want to get involved, please feel free to contact me or Steve McShane. And then finally, I'd just like to thank Tom and staff. JR came out to an earlier meeting of the California Air Pollution Control Managers Association, Air Pollution Control Officers Association, planning managers to talk about CCAs. And we had our membership meeting of air pollution control officers. All the directors throughout the state were in attendance, and JR came out again to talk to the air pollution control officers. He was very informative. It was an excellent presentation and very well received by the group. So it made me proud to be associated with this great organization. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Wow, very good. Any other comments? We open this to public comment. Any public comment on item 9? Okay, seeing none, we're moving to item 10. I'd like to thank everyone for giving their evening once again towards being on this council, and that includes the public. Thank you very much for being here, and the staff in particular. Our next meeting will be December 20th at 6 p.m. We're adjourned.